Hello, and welcome. If you're listening to this, chances are you've found yourself awake at a time when the world tells you that you should be sleeping. Maybe it's late evening, maybe it's well past midnight, or maybe you're somewhere in that quiet space between night and morning when everything feels suspended in time. There's no judgment here, no pressure. You're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're going to explore something fascinating, something you've probably experienced, but maybe never fully understood. We're going to talk about the wolf mind, that part of you that comes alive when the sun goes down, that surge of energy and clarity that appears just when you thought you'd be winding down for the day. You know the feeling. You've been tired all afternoon, maybe even struggling to keep your eyes open at your desk or on your couch. But then, as the evening deepens, something shifts. Suddenly, you feel awake, alert. Your mind clears. Ideas start flowing. You could clean your entire house, start a new project, have the deepest conversation of your life, or finally tackle that thing you've been putting off for weeks. This isn't random. This isn't your body betraying you or your sleep schedule being broken. This is ancient biology, working exactly as it was designed to work. For the next couple of hours, we're going to gently explore why this happens. We'll look at the science, the history, the rhythms that pulse through your body, whether you're aware of them or not. And we'll do it slowly, carefully, without any rush, because there's nowhere else you need to be right now. Nothing else demanding your attention. So get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your body settle into whatever position feels right. And let's begin to understand the wolf mind together. Why am I wide awake at night? So let's start with the question that might have brought you here tonight. The question you've probably asked yourself dozens, maybe hundreds of times. Why am I wide awake at night? It's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11. Everyone else seems to be settling in, getting drowsy, ready for bed. The house is quiet. The lights are dimming. And you're just getting started. Maybe you've felt guilty about this. Maybe you've wondered what's wrong with you. Maybe you've tried to force yourself onto a different schedule, setting earlier alarms, trying to go to bed at a reasonable time, only to find yourself staring at the ceiling, your mind racing, your body refusing to cooperate. Here's what I want you to know, and I want you to really hear this. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not failing at being a functional adult. You might be what researchers call a wolf chronotype, a classic night owl whose brain and body are simply set to switch on later in the day than most people's. And this isn't a choice you're making. It's not a bad habit you've fallen into. It's biology. It's genetics. It's the way you're wired at the most fundamental level. Let me paint you a picture. See if this sounds familiar. You wake up in the morning, maybe to an alarm, maybe naturally, and you feel foggy, heavy, like you're moving through water. Coffee helps a little, but not as much as it seems to help other people. You go through your morning in a kind of haze, functioning, but not really firing on all cylinders. Afternoon comes. You're okay. You're managing. You're getting things done, but you're not exactly at your peak. Maybe you feel a dip around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. That post-lunch slump that makes you want to put your head down on your desk. But then the evening arrives. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. The sun is setting or already gone. The day is technically ending, and something inside you begins to wake up. This is what researchers and people who experience it call the second wind. And if you're a wolf, you know exactly what this feels like. It's like someone turned on a light switch in your brain. Suddenly, you're alert. Your thoughts are clearer. You feel more like yourself than you have all day. Ideas that seemed impossible to grasp in the morning now flow easily. Conversations feel natural and engaging. You want to do things, creative things, productive things, social things. Other people are yawning, checking the time, mentioning how tired they are. And you're sitting there thinking, really? Now, but I just started feeling good. Many wolves describe this experience in remarkably similar ways. They talk about feeling more talkative in the evening, more motivated, more capable. Like their real personality emerges when the sun goes down. During the day, they're operating at 60, maybe 70%. But at night? At night, they're at 100%. That's when they feel like themselves. And here's the thing, this second wind isn't just in your head. It's not psychological. It's not about preference or lifestyle choices, though those can influence it. This is about your body's internal timing system, working on a different schedule than the majority of the population. Your body has what's called a circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock that runs on roughly a 24-hour cycle. This clock controls an enormous number of processes in your body. When you feel sleepy and when you feel alert. When your body temperature rises and falls. When certain hormones are released. When your digestion is most active. When your brain is sharpest. For most people, what researchers might call lions or bears in the chronotype system, this clock is set to wake them up relatively early, give them peak energy in the morning or early afternoon, and wind them down as evening approaches. Their bodies start producing melatonin, the sleep hormone, around 9 or 10 at night. Their core body temperature drops. Everything in their system says, time to sleep. But your clock? Your clock is set differently. If you're a wolf, your circadian rhythm runs later. Not wrong. Not broken. Just later. Like you're living in a different time zone than everyone else, even though you're in the same physical location. Your body isn't ready to produce significant amounts of melatonin at 9 or 10. It's waiting. Your core temperature isn't dropping yet. Your brain isn't shutting down. Instead, everything is ramping up. Your cortisol, which helps you feel alert and energized, might actually be rising when other people's is falling. Your cognitive function is improving when theirs is declining. This is why you get that second wind. It's not actually a second wind at all. It's your first real wind. It's your body's natural peak time finally arriving. Think about it this way. Imagine if someone who naturally wakes up at 6 in the morning, bright-eyed and ready to go, was forced to wake up at 3 in the morning every single day. Then they had to do their most important work at 4, 5, 6 in the morning, when their body was still producing sleep hormones and their brain was still in nighttime mode. They'd struggle. They'd feel off. They'd wonder why they couldn't function properly. That's what many wolves experience, except in reverse. The world is structured for early risers. School starts early. Work starts early. Important meetings happen in the morning. Society has decided that morning people are virtuous and disciplined, while night people are lazy and undisciplined. But you're not lazy. You're working against your biology every single day. And in the evening, when you finally get that second wind, when you finally feel like yourself. That's not you being difficult or contrary. That's you finally getting to operate in your natural rhythm. Studies have shown that chronotype, whether you're an early bird or a night owl, is significantly genetic. Some estimates suggest that as much as 50% of your chronotype is inherited. There are actual genes that influence how your circadian clock runs. You didn't choose this any more than you chose your eye color. And yet, wolves often spend years feeling like they're failing at something everyone else finds easy. Failing at mourning. Failing at being tired at the right time. Failing at fitting into a schedule that was never designed for them in the first place. If you're listening to this late at night, wide awake while the world sleeps, I want you to take a moment and let yourself off the hook. That second wind you're experiencing, that clarity and energy you feel right now, that's not a flaw. That's not something to fix or suppress or feel bad about. That's your wolf mind, doing exactly what it's meant to do. And over the next couple of hours, we're going to explore exactly why this happens, what's going on in your brain and body when that second wind arrives, and how this pattern of wakefulness has been part of human nature for as long as humans have existed. But for now, just rest in this knowledge. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're a wolf, awake in the night, exactly as you're meant to be. Naming the identity. Now that we've talked about what you're experiencing, let's talk about what you are. Let's give this a name. Let's make it real. You're a wolf. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. In the scientific study of human sleep patterns and circadian rhythms, you are what's known as a wolf chronotype. And this matters. Names matter. Labels matter. Because once you have a name for something, it stops being a vague feeling or a personal failure and becomes a recognized, studied, legitimate part of human diversity. Wolves make up roughly 15% of the population. 1 in every 6 or 7 people. That might not sound like a lot, but think about it. In a room of 30 people, 4 or 5 of them are wolves. In a typical workplace, in a classroom, in any gathering, there are wolves present. You're not some strange anomaly. You're part of a consistent, measurable pattern that shows up across cultures, across countries, across human populations everywhere. 15%. That's millions and millions of people whose bodies and brains operate on the same delayed schedule as yours. And here's something interesting. The wolf chronotype is strongly skewed toward evening alertness and late-night activity. Not just slightly. Strongly. This isn't about someone who prefers to sleep in a little on weekends, or who feels okay staying up past midnight occasionally. Wolves are fundamentally oriented toward the night. Your peak cognitive performance, probably somewhere between 6 p.m. and midnight, or even later. Your creative thinking, best after the sun goes down. Your ability to focus, to solve problems, to engage deeply with complex tasks. All of it improves as the day progresses into evening and night. This is the opposite of what most people experience. Most people, the lions who wake early and tire early, the bears who follow a more standard schedule, they peak during daylight hours. They're sharpest in the morning or early afternoon. By evening, they're declining. Their processing speed slows down. Their decision-making gets fuzzier. They make more mistakes. But you're just warming up. And I want to be very clear about something, because this is crucial, and it's something that wolves often internalize incorrectly after years of being told they're doing life wrong. This second wind, this evening energy peak, this pattern of coming alive at night, it is tied to your delayed circadian rhythm. It is biology. It is genetics. It is neuroscience and hormones, and the deep, ancient programming of your internal clock. It is not laziness. It is not bad habits. It is not lack of discipline or willpower. Let me say that again, because if you're a wolf, you've probably been told otherwise, either by other people or by that critical voice in your own head. You are not lazy. The fact that you can't easily wake up at 6 in the morning and feel refreshed, that's not a character flaw. The fact that you feel tired and foggy during morning hours when everyone else seems fine, that's not you being weak. The fact that you get a surge of energy at 9 or 10 at night when society says you should be winding down, that's not you being contrary or difficult. That's your circadian rhythm operating exactly as it's programmed to operate. Think about how we talk about morning people versus night people in our culture. Morning people are described as go-getters, early birds who catch the worm, disciplined and productive. They're praised. They're seen as successful. The corporate world loves them. I'm a morning person is something people say with pride. But night owls? Wolves. We're told we need to fix our sleep schedule. We're told to try harder, to set better routines, to just go to bed earlier. As if it were that simple. As if your entire biological clock could be reset through sheer determination and a slightly earlier bedtime. You've probably tried, haven't you? You've probably attempted to become a morning person. Maybe you set your alarm for 6 a.m., forced yourself out of bed, tried to establish a routine. And maybe it worked for a few days, or even a few weeks. You felt virtuous. You felt like you were finally getting it right. But it didn't stick, did it? Because eventually, your body reasserted itself. Eventually, you found yourself wide awake at 11 p.m., midnight, 1 in the morning, even though you were trying to sleep earlier. Eventually, those morning hours felt just as hard as they always had. Eventually, you came back to your natural pattern, and you probably felt like you failed. But you didn't fail. You can't fail at being what you are. A wolf trying to live like a lion is like a nocturnal animal trying to force itself to be diurnal. Owls are nocturnal. They hunt at night. Their eyes are designed for darkness. Their bodies are primed for nighttime activity. If you tried to train an owl to be active during the day and sleep at night, you might get some compliance for a while, but you'd be working against millions of years of evolution. The owl would be less effective, less healthy, less itself. You are a human owl, a wolf, and your nighttime orientation isn't something that needs to be cured. Now, does this mean you can never function in the morning? Of course not. Wolves adapt. Wolves survive in a morning person's world because they have to. You probably have jobs and responsibilities and commitments that require you to be awake and functional during hours that don't align with your natural rhythm. And you manage it. You cope. You drink coffee. You push through. You do what needs to be done. But managing it doesn't mean it's optimal. Coping doesn't mean it's easy. And the fact that you can force yourself to function in the morning doesn't mean that morning is your natural peak time. When researchers study chronotypes, they're not looking at what people can do when forced. They're looking at what people naturally do when allowed to follow their own rhythms. When wolves are given the freedom to sleep and wake according to their own internal clocks, during vacations, weekends, retirement, Anytime they're not constrained by external schedules, a clear pattern emerges. They go to bed late, often not until midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, sometimes later. And they wake up late, 9, 10, 11 in the morning, or even into the afternoon. And during those hours when they're awake in the evening and night, they're alert, they're productive, they're engaged, they're themselves. This isn't a sleep disorder. This isn't insomnia. Wolves sleep just fine. They just sleep on a different schedule. When allowed to follow their natural rhythm, wolves get the same amount and quality of sleep as anyone else. Their sleep is healthy. It's just timed differently. The problem isn't the wolf's sleep pattern. The problem is a society that has structured everything around one particular chronotype and labeled all the others as deviant. School starts at 8 in the morning. Why? Because that works well for lions and most bears. But for wolves? Wolves in school are being asked to learn complex material, to take tests, to perform academically during their worst cognitive hours. And then we wonder why some bright, capable students struggle. Work starts at 8 or 9 in the morning. Important meetings are scheduled first thing. Power breakfasts are a thing. Early birds are promoted and praised. Night owls are seen as less committed, less professional. But wolves doing creative work at midnight are just as professional and committed as lions doing the same work at 7 in the morning. The only difference is whether that work time is visible and valued by the dominant culture. Being a wolf means you've probably spent your entire life swimming upstream, getting up when your body wants to sleep, being evaluated and judged during your worst hours, finally feeling like yourself, just as the world is telling you it's time to shut down. But you are not the problem. The mismatch is the problem. 15% of the population, millions of people, all experiencing this same pattern, all feeling that same second wind in the evening, all carrying that same delayed circadian rhythm in their genes. You're part of a tribe, the wolf tribe. And it's time to stop seeing your membership in this tribe as something shameful or something that needs to be fixed. There are lions who bound out of bed at dawn, ready to conquer the day. There are bears who follow the sun, waking with the light and sleeping with the darkness. There are dolphins, another chronotype, who are light sleepers, often anxious, their sleep fragmented and sensitive. And there are wolves, strong, alert, sharp in the darkness, coming alive when others fade, carrying the night watch, seeing clearly when the world is quiet. That's what you are. That's your identity. That's your legitimate, scientifically recognized, genetically influenced chronotype. Not a flaw, not a phase, not something to outgrow or overcome. A wolf. And that second wind you feel in the evening, that's not random chance. That's not you fighting your own sleep. That's your evening energy peak, right on schedule, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Your delayed circadian rhythm is shifting everything later. Your melatonin production later. Your body temperature drop later. Your cognitive peak later. Your natural sleep onset later. Your natural wake time later. Everything shifted, like you're living in a time zone 2 or 3 hours ahead of everyone else, even though you're sitting in the same room. This is who you are. This is how you're built. And there is nothing wrong with it. So when that second wind comes tonight, or tomorrow night, or any night, when you feel that familiar surge of energy and clarity while others are yawning and heading to bed, you can recognize it for what it is. Not a problem to solve. Not a habit to break. Not a flaw in your character or discipline. Just a wolf being a wolf. Alive in the hours you were always meant to inhabit. And that's not just okay. That's exactly right. What's actually happening inside the body? So we've established what you are, a wolf. And we've talked about what that feels like, that second wind that arrives in the evening when the rest of the world is powering down. But now let's go deeper. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside your body. Because this isn't just a feeling. This is biochemistry. This is neuroscience. This is real, measurable, physical processes unfolding inside you every single day and night. Let's start with your internal circadian clock. You have, right now, deep in the center of your brain, a small cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's located in your hypothalamus, just above where your optic nerves cross. It's tiny, only about 20,000 neurons, but it controls so much of how you experience time, energy, and wakefulness. This is your master clock, your conductor, the metronome that keeps the rhythm of your entire biological system. This little cluster of neurons generates a rhythm that runs roughly, and this is important, roughly 24 hours. For some people, their internal clock runs slightly shorter than 24 hours. For others, it runs slightly longer. These small differences matter enormously. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus controls the timing of countless processes throughout your body. It tells your pineal gland when to start producing melatonin, the hormone that makes you feel sleepy. It influences when your body temperature rises and falls, and body temperature is deeply connected to alertness and sleep. It affects when your cortisol peaks, cortisol being the hormone that helps you feel awake and energized. It influences your blood pressure, your digestion, your immune function, even how your genes are expressed throughout the day and night. Everything is timed. Everything is scheduled. Your body is running on a program, and that program is set by your circadian clock. Now, here's where it gets interesting for wolves. Your internal circadian clock is delayed. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just delayed. Set to a later schedule than the average person's clock. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that all those natural wake-up signals, all those hormone rhythms that tell your body when to be alert and when to be sleepy, they're all shifted later than average. Let's walk through what this looks like over the course of a day. Most people, let's say a typical bear chronotype, their cortisol starts rising in the early morning hours, even before they wake up. By the time they open their eyes at 6 or 7 in the morning, their cortisol is already elevated, helping them feel alert and ready to start the day. Their cortisol peaks somewhere in the mid-morning, giving them maximum alertness and energy during those hours. But for a wolf, your cortisol isn't following that same timeline. When a bear's cortisol is peaking at 9 in the morning, yours might still be relatively low. You're not getting that natural surge of wake-up energy at the same time. Your cortisol will peak, absolutely it will, but it peaks later. Maybe late morning, maybe early afternoon, maybe not until evening. This is why you feel foggy in the morning. It's not laziness. It's not that you didn't sleep enough, though chronic sleep deprivation certainly makes it worse. It's that your body's natural alertness hormone hasn't kicked in yet. You're being asked to function before your biochemical wake-up call has even started. Now let's talk about melatonin, because this is crucial to understanding that second wind. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, though that's a bit of a simplification. Really, melatonin is a signal. It's your body's way of saying, it's nighttime now, we should start preparing for sleep. It doesn't knock you out instantly. It's more like a gentle nudge towards sleepiness that builds over time. For most people, melatonin production starts ramping up in the early evening. As the sun sets and darkness falls, their pineal gland starts releasing melatonin into the bloodstream. By 9 or 10 at night, their melatonin levels are elevated enough that they're feeling genuinely sleepy. The biological signal is clear, time to wind down. But your pineal gland? It's on a different schedule. When a bear's melatonin is rising at 9 p.m., yours might barely have started. Your body isn't getting that sleepy signal yet. There's no biological nudge towards sleep. Instead, you're wide awake, feeling alert, wondering why everyone else is yawning. Your melatonin production might not really ramp up until 11 p.m., midnight, 1 in the morning, or even later. That's when your body finally starts sending the signal that it's time to sleep. And this isn't because you stayed up looking at screens or drinking coffee, though those things can certainly influence it. This delayed melatonin production is your baseline. It's how your clock is set. So let's put this together. Let's say it's 8 or 9 in the evening. This is right around the time when many people experience what's called the wake maintenance zone, or sometimes the forbidden zone for sleep. A period in the early evening when it's actually quite difficult to fall asleep, even if you're tired. This is normal for everyone. But for most people, this zone passes, and then melatonin rises, and they start feeling sleepy. For you, the wolf, something different happens. That wake maintenance zone passes, and instead of sleepiness arriving, you get clarity, energy, alertness, that second wind. Why? Because you're entering your natural peak period. Your cortisol might still be relatively high. Your core body temperature, which affects cognitive performance, might be at an optimal level for alertness. Your melatonin is still low. Everything in your system is saying, this is a good time to be awake and active. Your brain is receiving no biological signals that it's time to sleep. Instead, it's receiving signals that say, this is prime time, let's do things. This is why the second wind feels so real, so undeniable. Because it is real. It's not psychological. It's not about willpower or discipline or habits. It's happening at the level of hormones and neurotransmitters, and core body temperature and circadian signaling. Your biology is telling you to be awake right now. And here's something that makes this even more fascinating. This pattern, this delayed clock, this wolf chronotype, it's partly wired into your genes. Genetics play a significant role in determining your chronotype. This isn't just about how your parents raised you or what habits you developed. This is about actual variations in your DNA. Researchers have identified several genes that influence circadian rhythms. You might have heard of some of them: clock genes, PR1, PR2, PR3, cryogenes, and others. These genes contain the instructions for making proteins that regulate your circadian clock. They're literally the gears and springs of your internal timepiece. And variations in these genes, small differences in the DNA sequence, are linked to chronotype differences. For example, certain variations in the PR3 gene are associated with being a morning person, or an evening person. Specific versions of clock genes correlate with when people naturally prefer to sleep and wake. There's even a gene called Cry1 that, when mutated in specific ways, causes people to have a significantly delayed sleep phase. They naturally stay up late and wake up late. This has been studied across families. Chronotype runs in families. If your parents are night owls, you're more likely to be a night owl. If you have siblings who are wolves, there's a good chance you're a wolf too. The genetic component is real and measurable. Some estimates suggest that 40 to 50% of the variation in chronotype between people can be attributed to genetic factors. 40 to 50%. That means that roughly half of what makes you a wolf is simply part of your genetic inheritance, like your height or your eye color. You didn't choose this. You can't just decide to have a different chronotype any more than you can decide to be taller or to need less oxygen. Being a wolf is partly wired in. It's in your genes. It's in the specific variations of clock and PER genes that you inherited from your parents. It's in how your suprachiasmatic nucleus developed. It's in how your brain responds to light and darkness. It's in how sensitive your melatonin production is to various signals. This is why all those attempts to fix your sleep schedule often feel like fighting against yourself. Because you are fighting against yourself. You're fighting against genetic programming, against hormone rhythms, against a circadian clock that's been set to a particular time since before you were born. Now, does this mean chronotype is completely fixed and unchangeable? Not entirely. There's still that other 50 to 60% of variation that comes from environmental factors, age, lifestyle, light exposure, and other influences. Your chronotype can shift somewhat over your lifetime. Teenagers tend to shift later, becoming more wolf-like, while older adults tend to shift earlier. And you can push your rhythm somewhat with consistent effort, using bright light therapy, maintaining strict sleep schedules, being very careful about light exposure in the evening. These things can nudge your clock a bit earlier or later. But there are limits. You can't turn a wolf into a lion. You can maybe shift a wolf's rhythm an hour or two with significant effort and perfect conditions, but you can't fundamentally rewrite the genetic programming. It's like being left-handed. We used to try to force left-handed children to write with their right hands, and they could learn to do it with enough pressure and practice. But it was never natural. It was never easy. They were always fighting their natural tendency. We don't do that anymore because we recognize that handedness is biological. It's partly genetic, and there's no good reason to force everyone to be the same. Your chronotype is similar. You can force yourself to live on a schedule that doesn't match your biology, and you might get functional at it with enough time and effort, but it will always be harder than it needs to be. You'll always be working against your natural rhythm. When you feel that second wind in the evening, when your mind suddenly clears and your energy surges, and you feel truly awake for the first time all day, you're not imagining it. You're not being difficult. You're not giving in to bad habits. You're experiencing the natural peak of your delayed circadian rhythm. Your cortisol is where it needs to be. Your melatonin is still low. Your body temperature is optimal. Your genes, those clock genes, those PER genes, are expressing themselves in the pattern they were designed to express. Your biology is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. You are a wolf, and right now, in this evening hour, your internal systems are finally aligned. Your master clock is ticking away in your hypothalamus, conducting the symphony of hormones and neurotransmitters and body temperature rhythms that make you feel alert and capable and alive. This is not a bug. This is a feature. This is your body working perfectly on its own schedule. And understanding this, really understanding that this is happening at the level of genes and hormones and brain regions, can be deeply liberating, because it means you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop thinking you're failing at something everyone else finds easy. You're not failing. You're just running on a different clock. A delayed clock. A wolf's clock. And that clock is ticking along perfectly, keeping time in its own rhythm, bringing you that second wind right on schedule every single evening. Exactly as it was designed to do. A day in the life of a wolf. Now let's get specific. Let's walk through what it actually looks like to live as a wolf in a world that wasn't built for you. Because understanding the science is one thing, but recognizing yourself in the day-to-day details, that's where things really click into place. Let's start with the evening before, because for a wolf, that's really where the day begins. It's 10 p.m., maybe 11. The house is quiet. If you live with other people, roommates, family, a partner, they might already be in bed, or they're heading that way. You can hear the subtle sounds of people winding down. Lights clicking off in other rooms. The bathroom faucet running as someone brushes their teeth. Footsteps getting softer as people settle in for the night. And you? You're sitting there feeling completely, perfectly awake. Maybe you're reading, or working on a project, or browsing the internet, or having the kind of deep, wandering thoughts that feel impossible during the daytime. Your mind is clear. If you're doing something creative, writing, drawing, making music, coding, it flows easily. Ideas connect in ways they didn't earlier in the day. Problems that seemed insurmountable at 3 in the afternoon suddenly have obvious solutions now at 11 at night. This is your time. These evening and nighttime hours. This is when you feel most yourself. Midnight approaches. Maybe passes. You're still not particularly sleepy. You might notice the time and think, I should probably go to bed. Not because your body is telling you to sleep, but because you know what's coming in the morning. You know that alarm is set. You know you have responsibilities that start early, whether you're ready for them or not. So you start the process. You brush your teeth. You change into sleep clothes. You get into bed. And here's where it gets frustrating, because getting into bed and actually falling asleep are two very different things when you're a wolf. You lie there. The room is dark. The house is quiet. Everything is set up perfectly for sleep. And your mind is still going. Not racing anxiously, necessarily. Just active. Thinking. Processing. Being awake. Because your melatonin hasn't really kicked in yet. Your body temperature hasn't dropped enough. Your cortisol hasn't lowered sufficiently. All those biological signals that say, it's time to sleep now. They're not there yet. If you could follow your natural rhythm, you wouldn't even try to sleep yet. You'd stay up until 1, 2, maybe 3 in the morning. That's when your body would naturally start feeling sleepy. That's when the melatonin would finally build up enough to make sleep feel like a good idea rather than an obligation. But you can't do that. Not on a work night. Not on a school night. Not when you have to be somewhere at 8 in the morning looking presentable and functional. So you lie there, trying to fall asleep before your body is ready. And eventually, maybe around 1 or 2 in the morning, you drift off. Not because your circadian rhythm said it was time, but because you've been lying in the dark long enough that sleep finally wins. You've gotten maybe 5, 6, possibly 7 hours before the alarm goes off, if you're lucky. And then, the alarm. That sound. Whatever sound it is, a beep, a buzz, a song, a gentle chime. It pulls you out of sleep like you're being dragged up from the bottom of a deep pool. Your eyes open, but you don't feel awake. You feel heavy, thick, like there's a weight pressing down on your entire body. This is not a refreshing wake-up. This is not natural arousal from sleep. This is forced wakefulness, and every cell in your body knows it. Your cortisol hasn't risen yet. Not enough, anyway. Your body temperature is still in its nighttime low. Your melatonin might still be lingering in your system. Everything inside you is saying, it's not time yet, we're still supposed to be asleep. But the alarm is going off, and you have places to be, so you hit snooze. Of course you hit snooze. 9 minutes later, the alarm goes off again. You hit snooze again. Maybe you do this 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It's not that you're lazy. It's that your body is fighting desperately to get a little more sleep, because from a biological perspective, you're being woken up in the middle of your sleep cycle. If you're a lion, a morning person, you might wake up spontaneously around 6 or 7 a.m., before your alarm even goes off. Your body is ready. Your cortisol has been rising for the past hour. You feel alert. You're ready to start the day. That's not you. You almost never wake up spontaneously in the morning. Almost never. When you do wake before your alarm, it's usually because something disrupted your sleep. A noise, a worry, discomfort. Not because your body was naturally ready to be awake. Wolves rely on alarms and snooze buttons. Not out of choice, but out of necessity. Because your natural wake time, the time your body would spontaneously wake up if left to its own devices, is probably somewhere around 7:30 to 9 in the morning, or even later. But the world doesn't let you sleep until 9. So you drag yourself out of bed at 6, 6:30, 7. You move through the morning like you're moving through fog. The shower helps a little. Hot water, the physical act of moving. It brings you slightly closer to wakefulness. But you still don't feel truly awake. You feel functional, maybe. Operational. But not good. Coffee. If you drink it, this is when you need it. Not want it, need it. For a morning person, coffee is a pleasant enhancement to an already alert state. For you, it's more like medication. It's what gets you from barely conscious to able to have a conversation. You might have 2 cups, 3, throughout the morning, and it helps. It definitely helps. But it doesn't make you feel the way morning people seem to feel naturally. It just gets you to a baseline level of function. You go through your morning in this state. If you have kids, you're getting them ready for school while feeling like you yourself need another 3 hours of sleep. If you're commuting to work, you're doing it on autopilot, maybe spacing out at red lights, definitely not at your mental sharpest. If you have morning meetings, morning classes, any kind of early cognitive demand, you're working uphill. You can do it. You absolutely can. But it takes more effort than it would take later in the day. You might have to read things twice. You might struggle to come up with the right word. Your reaction time is slower. Your creativity is dampened. Other people seem fine. They're chatting, they're engaged, They're asking questions and making jokes and contributing ideas. And you're there, participating as best you can, but part of you is still back in bed. This isn't in your head. This is measurable. Studies have shown that when chronotypes are tested on cognitive tasks during their non-optimal times of day, their performance suffers. Wolves tested in the morning perform worse on tasks requiring attention, memory, and problem-solving compared to how they perform in the evening. It's not that you're not smart or capable. It's that you're being tested during your biological low point. But slowly, as the morning progresses toward late morning, toward noon, something starts to shift. Your first real energy rise tends to come around this time. Late morning, midday. Not right after waking, hours after waking. Your cortisol is finally where it needs to be. Your body temperature has risen. That thick fog that's been clouding your brain all morning starts to lift. You notice it in small ways first. Conversations feel easier. You can focus on your work without having to force it quite so hard. If someone asks you a question, the answer comes to you more readily. You feel more present. This is your body finally catching up to the day. Your circadian rhythm is finally entering a more alert phase. You're not at your peak yet. That's still hours away, but you're at least operating at a reasonable level now. Lunch happens. Afternoon arrives. You're functional. You're getting things done. You might even feel pretty good, depending on the day and what you're doing. But you're still not at your best. Not yet. Then the afternoon starts to wane. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. For many people, this is when energy starts to dip. The post-lunch slump hits. People start checking the clock, counting down to the end of the workday. They're getting tired. You might feel some of this too. But you also might notice something else starting to happen. A subtle shift. A sense of anticipation. Like your system knows what's coming. 6 p.m. Work ends, or class ends, or whatever structured part of your day has been demanding your presence. It's over. You head home, or you transition into evening, and something in you starts to wake up. Not the way you were awake during the day, functioning, operational, getting by. Really wake up. 7 p.m. 8 p.m. You're feeling good now. Better than you felt all day. If you're having dinner with people, you're more talkative, more engaged. Your sense of humor is sharper. You laugh more easily. Ideas come to you without effort. If you have evening plans, seeing friends, going to an event, doing something creative or active, you have energy for it. Real energy. Not the forced energy of caffeine masking exhaustion, but genuine biological vitality. This is that second wind everyone talks about. Except it's not really a second wind, is it? It's your first wind. Your actual natural peak. 9 p.m. rolls around. 10 p.m. Other people are yawning, making comments about being tired, starting to fade. And you? You're just hitting your stride. If you could structure your entire day around this time, if you could do your most important work, your most creative thinking, your deepest conversations between 8 p.m. and midnight, your life would look completely different. You'd be so much more productive, more engaged, more yourself. But that's not how the world works. The world is done with you by 9 p.m. Stores are closing. Offices are empty. The infrastructure of society is winding down. So you use these hours for yourself. For hobbies, for side projects, for the things you actually care about that don't fit into the daytime schedule. for thinking, for creating, for being. And then, eventually, the cycle starts again. That knowledge that you need to go to bed, not because you're sleepy, but because the alarm is set. The struggle to fall asleep before your body is ready. The brutal wake-up. The foggy morning. Day after day after day. This is the life of a wolf in a world built for morning birds. And if this sounds familiar, if you recognize yourself in this daily pattern, in the alarm and the snooze button and the morning fog and the late evening clarity, then you understand why that second wind isn't just some random burst of energy. It's your biology, finally getting to operate on its own schedule, finally getting to be what it is. For a few precious hours each evening, you get to be in sync with yourself. You get to feel what it's like when your cortisol and your melatonin and your body temperature and your circadian clock are all aligned exactly right. You get to feel like yourself. And then morning comes again, and the cycle repeats. But at least now you know. Now you understand. This pattern, this daily struggle and evening triumph, isn't a personal failing. It's just what happens when a wolf tries to live on a lion's schedule. Every single day. When wolves truly shine. We've talked a lot about struggle, about mornings that feel impossible, about fighting your own biology, about living in a world that's structured around someone else's rhythm. And all of that is real. All of that matters. But now let's shift. Let's talk about strength. Let's talk about what happens when a wolf gets to be a wolf. Because you're not just someone who struggles in the morning. You're someone who excels in the evening. And that excellence, that capacity for peak performance, it's not less valuable just because it happens at a different time than most people's peak. Let's talk about when wolves truly shine. Your peak productivity, your deepest focus, your most creative thinking. These don't happen at 9 in the morning. They don't happen during the hours when society expects everyone to be at their best. For you, these gifts arrive later. Much later. Research on chronotypes shows that wolves typically hit their stride somewhere between noon and 9 p.m., with especially strong performance in the late afternoon and early evening. That's a 9-hour window of potential peak performance. 9 hours when your brain is operating at or near its optimal level. Think about that. 9 hours. That's longer than a standard workday. That's a massive stretch of time when you could be doing your best work, your deepest thinking, your most creative problem solving. But here's the catch. Most of that window happens when the traditional workday is ending or already over. Noon to 3 p.m.? Okay, that's still within standard work hours. You can use that. But 3 to 6 p.m.? 6 to 9 p.m.? Those are your peak hours, and for most people, that's when they're commuting home, making dinner, winding down. The office is emptying out. The workday is done. But not for you. For you, that's when everything clicks into place. Let's talk about what peak performance actually feels like when you're in it. When you're operating during your optimal hours. It's late afternoon. Maybe 5:30. The sun is getting lower in the sky, or maybe it's already set depending on the season. You're working on something. It could be anything, really. A work project, a creative endeavor, a problem you're trying to solve, even just in conversation or an idea you're exploring. And you notice that it's easy. Not easy like it's simple or unchallenging. Easy like it flows. Like your brain is making connections without effort. Like the right words come when you need them. Like solutions present themselves naturally, like you can hold complex ideas in your mind without strain. You can focus, really focus, the kind of deep, sustained attention that felt so hard to achieve in the morning. That thing you were working on at 10 a.m. that kept slipping away from your grasp, that required constant rereading and backtracking and forcing yourself to concentrate. Now it's clear. Now you can see the whole picture. Now you can dive deep and stay there. This is your brain operating at peak efficiency. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for complex thinking, planning, decision-making, is fully online. Your working memory is sharp. Your processing speed is optimal. The neural networks that allow you to think creatively, to make novel connections, to solve problems in innovative ways, they're all firing on all cylinders. And it feels good. It feels right. It feels like this is who you actually are, when you're not fighting against your own biology. When researchers study cognitive performance across different chronotypes, they find something fascinating. It's not that morning people are inherently smarter or more capable than evening people. It's that everyone performs better during their optimal hours. When a morning person is tested at 8 a.m. and an evening person is tested at 8 p.m., their performance is roughly equivalent. The morning person isn't superior. They just have the advantage of living in a world that tests everyone at 8 a.m. But give the wolf their optimal hours, and something remarkable happens. Deep focus abilities emerge. Wolves, when working during their late day hours, can achieve what's sometimes called flow state. That psychological condition where you're completely immersed in what you're doing, where time seems to disappear, where the work itself becomes almost effortless because you're so fully engaged with it. This is hard to achieve when you're fighting fatigue, when you're forcing yourself to concentrate through the fog of a circadian low point. But during your peak hours, flow becomes accessible, natural even, and creativity. This is where wolves often really excel. There's something about the late afternoon and evening hours that seems to unlock creative thinking for wolves. Maybe it's that the day's structured demands are done, creating mental space. Maybe it's the quality of light, the way evening feels different from morning. Maybe it's simply that your brain's neural networks are at their most fluid and connected during these hours. Whatever the reason, wolves often report that their best ideas come in the evening. That breakthrough moment in a project? Evening. That flash of insight that solves a problem you've been wrestling with for days? Evening. That creative work that feels truly inspired rather than forced? Evening. Bursts of creativity. That's how it sometimes feels. Like something opening up inside your mind, releasing ideas and connections and possibilities that weren't available earlier in the day. Writers know this. Artists know this. Programmers know this. Anyone who does creative or complex cognitive work knows that there are hours when it flows and hours when it doesn't. For you, the hours when it flows are late. And that's not a disadvantage. That's your advantage, if you can structure your life to use it. Imagine if you could arrange your day around your actual peak hours. What would that look like? You'd wake up naturally, around 8 or 9 in the morning, without an alarm dragging you from sleep. You'd move through your morning slowly, gently. Maybe some light tasks, some administrative work, some email. Nothing too demanding. Just easing into the day. Midday, you'd start to feel more alert. You'd tackle moderate complexity tasks. Things that need attention, but not your absolute best thinking. And then, As afternoon transitions to evening, you'd shift into your important work. The stuff that really matters. The deep thinking. The creative projects. The complex problem solving. You'd work through the evening, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, with full focus and energy, producing your best work. You'd go to bed around 1 or 2 in the morning, when your body was actually ready for sleep. You'd get 8 solid hours, and then you'd wake naturally and do it all again. In this schedule, you'd be using your peak hours for peak work. You'd never have to force yourself through morning fog to do important tasks. You'd never feel guilty about being most productive in the evening. You'd just be working with your biology instead of against it. And your output, your productivity, your creativity, the quality of your work, would be extraordinary. This isn't fantasy. This is what happens when wolves are actually allowed to structure their work around their chronotype. There are people who've managed it. Freelancers who set their own hours. Remote workers with flexible schedules. People in creative fields where the work matters more than the hours. Night shift workers who've leaned into their natural rhythm. Entrepreneurs who've built their businesses around their peak times. And these wolves, they thrive. They're not fighting themselves every day. They're not spending half their energy just trying to be awake and functional. They're working during the hours when their brain wants to work, when their body is primed for productivity, when their creativity is most accessible. And it shows in the quality of their work, in their satisfaction with what they do, in their sense of being aligned with themselves rather than constantly struggling. This is what's possible when a wolf gets to be a wolf. Strong deep focus abilities, extended periods of concentration, the capacity to tackle complex problems and see them through to completion without the mental fatigue that comes from working at the wrong time of day. Creative breakthroughs, novel solutions, ideas that connect disparate concepts in unexpected ways. The kind of thinking that happens when your mind is fluid and open and operating at its best. High-quality output. Work you're proud of. Work that represents your actual capabilities, not your diminished morning self. And perhaps most importantly, a sense of ease. Not that the work itself is easy, but that it's not a battle. That you're not fighting your own brain to think, fighting your own body to stay alert, fighting your own nature to be productive. You're just working, during your hours, when you're meant to be working. There's a quote often attributed to various people, but the essence is this: everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. You're not a tree-climbing fish. You're a wolf. And wolves don't shine at dawn. They shine in the evening, in the night, in the hours when the world is quiet and dark, and most people are winding down. That's when you climb. That's when you soar. That's when you show what you're truly capable of. Between noon and 9 p.m. Especially between 4 and 9. Those late afternoon, early evening hours when the light is golden and then fading, when the day is transitioning to night. Those are your hours. That's your time to shine. And if you've spent your whole life feeling like you're not a morning person, like you're not as productive as you should be, like everyone else has figured out something you can't quite grasp, maybe it's not that you're not productive. Maybe it's that you're trying to be productive at the wrong time. Maybe you're brilliant. Maybe you're capable of extraordinary focus and creativity and output. Just not at 8 in the morning. Maybe at 8 in the evening instead. And that's not worse. It's not less valid. It's not a consolation prize. It's just different. It's just you. It's just when wolves shine. And you do shine. In your hours, with your rhythm, when your biology is aligned with your tasks. You absolutely shine. You'd wake up naturally, around 8 or 9 in the morning, without an alarm dragging you from sleep. You'd move through your morning slowly, gently. Maybe some light tasks, some administrative work, some email. Nothing too demanding. Just easing into the day. Midday, you'd start to feel more alert. You'd tackle moderate complexity tasks. Things that need attention, but not your absolute best thinking. And then, as afternoon transitions to evening, you'd shift into your important work. The stuff that really matters. The deep thinking. The creative projects. The complex problem solving. You'd work through the evening, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, with full focus and energy, producing your best work. You'd go to bed around 1 or 2 in the morning, when your body was actually ready for sleep. You'd get 8 solid hours, and then you'd wake naturally and do it all again. In this schedule, you'd be using your peak hours for peak work. You'd never have to force yourself through morning fog to do important tasks. You'd never feel guilty about being most productive in the evening. You'd just be working with your biology instead of against it. And your output, your productivity, your creativity, the quality of your work, would be extraordinary. This isn't fantasy. This is what happens when wolves are actually allowed to structure their work around their chronotype. There are people who've managed it. Freelancers who set their own hours. Remote workers with flexible schedules. People in creative fields where the work matters more than the hours. Night shift workers who've leaned into their natural rhythm. Entrepreneurs who've built their businesses around their peak times. And these wolves, they thrive. They're not fighting themselves every day. They're not spending half their energy just trying to be awake and functional. They're working during the hours when their brain wants to work, when their body is primed for productivity, when their creativity is most accessible. And it shows in the quality of their work, in their satisfaction with what they do, in their sense of being aligned with themselves rather than constantly struggling. This is what's possible when a wolf gets to be a wolf. Strong deep focus abilities, extended periods of concentration, the capacity to tackle complex problems and see them through to completion without the mental fatigue that comes from working at the wrong time of day. Creative breakthroughs, novel solutions, ideas that connect disparate concepts in unexpected ways. The kind of thinking that happens when your mind is fluid and open and operating at its best. High-quality output. Work you're proud of. Work that represents your actual capabilities, not your diminished morning self. And perhaps most importantly, a sense of ease. Not that the work itself is easy, but that it's not a battle. That you're not fighting your own brain to think, fighting your own body to stay alert, fighting your own nature to be productive. You're just working, during your hours, when you're meant to be working. There's a quote often attributed to various people, but the essence is this: everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. You're not a tree-climbing fish. You're a wolf. And wolves don't shine at dawn. They shine in the evening, in the night, in the hours when the world is quiet and dark, and most people are winding down. That's when you climb. That's when you soar. That's when you show what you're truly capable of. Between noon and 9 p.m. Especially between 4 and 9. Those late afternoon, early evening hours when the light is golden and then fading, when the day is transitioning to night. Those are your hours. That's your time to shine. And if you've spent your whole life feeling like you're not a morning person, like you're not as productive as you should be, like everyone else has figured out something you can't quite grasp, maybe it's not that you're not productive. Maybe it's that you're trying to be productive at the wrong time. Maybe you're brilliant. Maybe you're capable of extraordinary focus and creativity and output. Just not at 8 in the morning. Maybe at 8 in the evening instead. And that's not worse. It's not less valid. It's not a consolation prize. It's just different. It's just you. It's just when wolves shine. And you do shine. In your hours, with your rhythm, when your biology is aligned with your tasks. You absolutely shine. The clash with the modern world. So we've established what you are, how you work, and when you shine. We've talked about the biology, the genetics, the reality of your delayed circadian rhythm. We've painted the picture of what's possible when a wolf gets to operate on a wolf's schedule. But now we need to talk about the tension, the conflict, the daily collision between who you are and how the world expects you to be. Because here's the truth. The modern world was not built for wolves. It was built for morning people, for lions and bears, for people whose cortisol peaks at 9 a.m., whose melatonin rises at 9 p.m., whose natural sleep-wake cycle aligns perfectly with sunrise and sunset and the traditional workday. The modern world runs on a schedule that feels natural and reasonable to about 85% of the population. And if you're in that majority, you might never even think about it. You might never question why school starts at 8 a.m., why important meetings are scheduled first thing in the morning, why the workday runs from 9 to 5. It just makes sense. To most people. But you're not most people. You're a wolf. And for you, this standard structure, this framework that most of society takes for granted, is a constant source of struggle. Let's talk about the 9 to 5 schedule, the foundation of modern working life. Arrive at 9 in the morning, or 8, or even 7:30. Work through the day. Leave at 5, or 6, or whenever your particular job releases you. For a morning person, this is perfect. They wake up naturally around 6 or 7. They have a couple of hours to get ready, maybe exercise, eat breakfast, commute. They arrive at work during their peak cognitive hours. They spend their morning, their best, sharpest time, being productive. By afternoon, they're starting to decline. But that's okay, because the day is winding down anyway. They go home, they have dinner, they relax, they go to bed at a reasonable hour, feeling satisfied with their productive day. The system works for them. It was designed for them. But for you? For a wolf forced into a 9 to 5 schedule? You're being asked to arrive at work during your worst hours. Your absolute cognitive low point. The time when your brain is still foggy. Your cortisol hasn't peaked. Your body is still trying to figure out why it's awake. And you're expected to perform. To be professional. To contribute. To have ideas and make decisions and engage with complex tasks. During the hours when your brain is least capable of doing those things. Then, as the day progresses, you start to wake up. By afternoon, you're finally functional. Maybe even good. You're starting to hit your stride. You're getting into the flow of things. And then the workday ends. 5 o'clock. Time to go home. Just as you're reaching the hours when you could really do your best work, when your brain is primed and ready and capable, you're dismissed. You go home. And what happens at home, in the evening, during your actual peak hours? Nothing, from the world's perspective. Evening is for personal time, for relaxation, for winding down. It's not for productivity. It's not for important work. Those hours don't count. Except they do count. They count enormously. They're your hours. They're when you could be brilliant, if only brilliance were required of you at 8 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. This is the fundamental clash, the mismatch between your biology and the structure of modern life. And it's not just about work. It's about everything. Early morning commitments, doctor's appointments at 8 a.m., breakfast meetings, morning classes, parent-teacher conferences before school, the DMV opening at 8, the bank, the post office, the government offices, all operating on morning schedules. If you need to interface with any institution, any official system, you're doing it during your worst hours. And the impact of this isn't just inconvenience. It's not just annoyance. It's sleep deprivation. When you're a wolf living on a standard schedule, you're constantly caught between two impossible demands. Your body wants to stay up late and sleep late. Society demands that you wake up early. So what happens? You stay up relatively late. Maybe not as late as you naturally would, but later than you should given your wake time. Because that's when you finally feel alive. That's when you finally get to be yourself. Those evening hours are precious. They're when you do the things you care about, when you connect with your own thoughts, when you engage with hobbies or creativity or relationships in a meaningful way. But then the alarm goes off at 6:30 or 7, and you've only slept 6 hours, maybe 5.5, maybe less, night after night after night. You're chronically sleep deprived, and chronic sleep deprivation has consequences, serious ones. Your cognitive performance suffers. Your memory consolidation is impaired. Your emotional regulation becomes more difficult. You're more irritable, more reactive, less resilient. Your physical health declines. Higher risk of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Your immune system weakens. Your mental health struggles. Higher rates of depression and anxiety in chronically sleep-deprived people. And here's the cruel irony. You're being judged on your performance during your worst hours while suffering from sleep deprivation caused by being forced to wake during your worst hours. You're underperforming relative to your true ability. Not because you lack ability, not because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're being evaluated at the wrong time while running on insufficient sleep. Wolves in standard 9-to-5 jobs often struggle. They get feedback that they're not morning people, that they need to be more alert in meetings, that they seem disengaged early in the day. They're passed over for promotions. They're seen as less committed, less professional, less productive than their morning person colleagues. But put that same wolf in an evening meeting, or give them a flexible schedule where they can work their peak hours, and suddenly they're a star performer. Suddenly they're engaged, creative, productive, brilliant. The person didn't change. The schedule changed. And there's another layer to this struggle that's more subtle but equally important. Because daytime hours can feel like moving through mud for wolves, that sensation of everything being harder than it should be, of having to push through resistance just to accomplish basic tasks, Many wolves unconsciously develop a coping strategy. They conserve effort earlier in the day, not deliberately, not as a conscious choice, but as an adaptive response to chronic energy mismatch. If you know from years of experience that morning tasks are going to drain you disproportionately, that focusing in the early day requires enormous effort for minimal return, your brain learns to hold back, to not invest fully, to save your resources. You do what's required. You meet your obligations. You show up and participate and complete your tasks. But you're not giving it everything you have. You can't, because if you gave it everything in the morning, you'd have nothing left for the evening, which is when you actually feel alive. So you coast a little in the morning. You do the minimum necessary to get by. You save your cognitive and emotional energy. And then, in the evening, when the demands are off, when work is over, when you're supposedly just relaxing, that's when all that conserved energy becomes available. That's when you could tackle complex problems, engage deeply with creative work, have meaningful conversations, learn new skills, work on projects you care about. But you're not being paid for that. You're not being evaluated on that. No one sees your evening brilliance. No one measures your nighttime productivity. They only see the morning you, the foggy, conserving, getting by version of you, and they judge you on that. This is the clash. This is the fundamental tension. You have capacity. You have energy. You have cognitive resources and creative potential, and the ability to focus deeply and produce excellent work. Just not when the world wants you to have it. Your peak hours are invisible hours. Your best self emerges when society has stopped watching. Your true abilities manifest during time that doesn't count. And so you're constantly underestimated, constantly seen as less than you are, because you're being measured by a clock that doesn't match your own. It's exhausting, not just physically, though it is that, but emotionally, psychologically, to know what you're capable of, and to never get to fully show it. To perform at 60% during evaluation hours, knowing you could perform at 100% if only the evaluation happened at a different time. To be chronically sleep deprived, because the only way to get any time for yourself is to steal it from sleep. To feel guilty about struggling in the morning, even though you now understand it's biological. This is what it means to be a wolf in the modern world. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're just living in a system that wasn't designed for you. A system that schedules everything important during your low point. A system that dismisses you just as you're reaching your high point. A system that sees your adaptation strategy, conserving effort early to have energy late, as laziness rather than survival. The modern world expects you to be a morning person. It rewards morning people. It's structured around morning people. It assumes everyone is a morning person, or should be, or could be if they just tried harder. And when you can't meet that expectation, when you struggle with early mornings and feel alive at night, the world tells you to fix yourself. Get a better sleep schedule. Go to bed earlier. Wake up earlier. Be more disciplined. As if discipline could rewrite your genes. As if willpower could reset your circadian clock. As if trying harder could make you into something you're not. The clash with the modern world isn't your fault. You didn't create this mismatch, but you live with it. Every single day. Arriving at work during your worst hours. Leaving just as you hit your best hours. Conserving energy when you should be able to give fully. Staying up late to finally feel like yourself. Never getting enough sleep. Always underperforming relative to your potential. That's the tension. That's the conflict. That's what it means to be a wolf trying to survive in a world built for morning birds. Why the night feels so powerful. Let's come back to that feeling. That moment. That shift that happens in the evening when everything changes. You know the one. We've talked around it. We've mentioned it. We've acknowledged it. But now let's really examine it. Let's understand why the night feels so powerful for you. Why that second wind, that surge of energy and clarity that arrives when everyone else is fading, feels less like a random burst and more like coming home. It's evening. Maybe 7 o'clock. Maybe 8. Maybe later. The specific time varies from person to person, from day to day, but the experience is remarkably consistent across wolves. Something shifts. It's not dramatic. It's not like a light switch flipping. It's more like a crescendo, like music that's been building quietly in the background, suddenly becoming clear and present and impossible to ignore. You feel it in your body first. That heaviness that's been with you since morning. That sense of moving through resistance, of your limbs being slightly too heavy, of everything requiring just a bit more effort than it should. It lifts. You feel lighter, more present in your own skin, more here. And your mind becomes clear, sharp, like a fog you didn't even fully realize was there suddenly dissipates. And you can see everything with perfect clarity. This is the famous second wind, the thing that defines the wolf experience, the phenomenon that makes you stay up later than you mean to, night after night, because these hours feel too good to waste on sleep. But why? Why does this happen? Why does the evening feel so much more powerful than the rest of the day? Let's start with what's happening in your body. Because this isn't psychological. This isn't about your mood or your preferences or your habits. This is physiology. Your circadian rhythm schedules your alertness and your body temperature to rise later in the day than most people's. Let's break that down. Body temperature is deeply connected to alertness. This isn't something most people think about, but your core body temperature fluctuates throughout the day and night, and these fluctuations are tightly linked to your sleep-wake cycle. For most people, body temperature is lowest in the early morning hours, just before waking. Then it rises through the morning and into the afternoon, peaks somewhere in the late afternoon or early evening, and then begins to decline as night approaches. As temperature drops, sleepiness increases. This temperature rhythm is controlled by your circadian clock. It's not random. It's programmed. But your program runs differently. Your circadian rhythm schedules your temperature to rise later and peak later. So while a morning person's body temperature might peak at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and then start declining by 7 or 8 in the evening, making them feel sleepy, your body temperature might not peak until 7 or 8 in the evening, or later, and higher body temperature is associated with higher alertness. When your core temperature is elevated, your brain is more active, your cognitive performance is better, you feel more awake. So in the evening, when other people's temperatures are dropping and they're getting sleepy, your temperature is still rising or at its peak. Your body is sending signals of alertness, not sleepiness. That's part of why evening feels so good. Your body temperature is optimal. Your brain is operating at the temperature it performs best at. But there's more. Let's talk about hormones again, because they're crucial to understanding this. Cortisol. We've mentioned it before. It's often called the stress hormone, but that's misleading. Really, cortisol is the wake-up hormone, the alertness hormone. It helps you feel energized and ready to engage with the world. For most people, cortisol peaks in the early morning. It starts rising before they even wake up, preparing the body for the day ahead. By mid-morning, cortisol is high, giving them natural energy and alertness. Then it gradually declines through the day, reaching its lowest point late at night. But your cortisol profile is shifted. Your cortisol doesn't peak in the early morning, or if it does, it's a smaller peak than you'll experience later. Your cortisol might peak in the late morning, or in the afternoon, or in the early evening, shifted later, along with everything else in your circadian system. So when evening arrives and other people's cortisol is low and declining, yours might still be relatively elevated. You're still getting that hormonal signal of alertness and energy. And melatonin. We've talked about this too, but it bears repeating because it's so central to understanding your experience. Melatonin onset. The point when your body starts producing significant amounts of the sleep hormone is delayed for you. For many people, melatonin onset happens around 9 or 10 p.m. Their pineal gland starts pumping out melatonin, signaling to the brain and body that it's time to prepare for sleep. Within an hour or two, they're feeling genuinely sleepy, ready for bed. But your melatonin onset? Delayed. Maybe not starting until 11 p.m., midnight, 1 in the morning, or even later. So at 9 or 10 in the evening, when many people are starting to feel sleepy because their melatonin is rising, you feel nothing of the sort. Your melatonin is still low. There's no biological signal telling you to sleep. Instead, there's the opposite. Your body temperature is high. Your cortisol is decent. Your melatonin is low. Every signal is pointing toward wakefulness, toward alertness, toward activity. This is why you simply do not feel naturally sleepy at the hours many others do. It's not that you're fighting sleep. It's that sleep isn't even knocking on your door yet. The biological invitation to sleep hasn't been extended. And this hormonal and temperature profile that creates strong evening alertness, this is what generates that powerful arousal signal in the evening instead of the morning. Arousal, in this context, doesn't mean excitement or stimulation. It means awakeness, alertness, the state of being physiologically ready to engage with the world. For a morning person, the strongest arousal signal comes in the morning. That's when all their systems align, temperature rising, cortisol peaking, melatonin low. They feel that surge of, I'm awake, I'm ready, let's go. You feel that same surge, the same alignment of systems, the same powerful arousal signal, just in the evening instead. That's your second wind. That's what you're feeling when the night becomes powerful. It's not actually a second wind at all. It's your first and primary wind. It's your body's natural peak arousal state, arriving exactly when your circadian rhythm scheduled it to arrive. But here's what makes it feel even more powerful, even more pronounced, even more undeniable than it might otherwise be. The environment changes in the evening, and that change amplifies everything you're feeling. Think about your typical day. Morning and afternoon are full of demands, obligations, schedules, other people, noise, interruptions. Things you have to do, whether you feel like doing them or not. Even if you work from home, even if you have relative freedom in how you structure your day, there are still external demands. Meetings, deadlines, emails, phone calls, the hum of the world doing its business. And you're moving through all of this while not at your best. While foggy in the morning, gradually waking up through the afternoon, but still dealing with all these demands and distractions even as you start to feel better. But then evening comes, and the world quiets. Work is done. Obligations are met. The pace of incoming demands slows to a trickle or stops entirely. If you live with other people, they might be winding down, giving you space. The phone stops ringing. The emails stop coming, or at least they're no longer urgent. The environment becomes quiet, calm, still. Fewer distractions, fewer interruptions, fewer demands on your attention. And at the exact same time, your internal alertness is peaking. Can you see what happens? Can you see why this feels so powerful? You're finally at your cognitive and physical best. Temperature optimal, hormones aligned, arousal high. And for the first time all day, the environment is allowing you to actually use that state without constant interruption. Internal peak alertness aligns with external quiet. And the result is focus, clarity, flow. The feeling that you can finally think, finally create, finally be fully present with whatever you're doing. During the day, even when you start feeling better in the afternoon, you're still navigating around distractions. You might be getting into a task, starting to focus, and then meeting, email, question from a coworker, phone call, something pulling you out of whatever depth you were achieving. But at night you can sink deep. You can stay with a thought, follow it where it goes, explore its implications. You can work on something for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours without interruption. And your brain is ready for it, primed for it, capable of it. This is why the night feels so powerful. It's not just that you're more alert. It's that you're more alert at a time when you can actually use that alertness without the world constantly fragmenting your attention. The combination is intoxicating, almost addictive in a way, because it feels so good. It feels so right. Finally being at your best. Finally being able to use your mind the way it's meant to be used. Finally having the mental resources and the environmental space to actually do something meaningful. No wonder you don't want to sleep. No wonder you stay up later than you should. Because these hours are precious. They're when you get to be yourself, fully and completely. The day feels like compromise, like managing, like coping with being not quite right and dealing with constant demands anyway. But the night feels like freedom. Your strongest arousal signal arrives in the evening. Your body temperature is perfect. Your hormones are aligned for wakefulness and focus. Your melatonin hasn't started its sleepy signals yet. And the world has finally stopped asking things of you, creating the space for you to ask things of yourself. That's the second wind. That's why it feels so powerful, so undeniable, so much more real than any other part of your day. Because it is more real. It's you, operating at full capacity, without the fog of morning or the demands of the day or the mismatch between your biology and the world's schedule. It's just you, your brain, your body, your rhythm, finally synchronized, finally allowed to be what they are. And when that happens, when internal readiness meets external space, It creates a feeling that's hard to describe to people who don't experience it. Power, clarity, presence, aliveness, flow. The feeling that you're finally fully here. That your mind is sharp and clear and capable. That time has taken on a different quality, less rushed, more spacious. That you could do anything right now if you chose to. That's what the night gives you. That's why it feels so powerful. Not because you're fighting sleep, though the world might interpret it that way, but because you're not remotely sleepy. Because your biology is telling you to be awake. Because your arousal systems are firing exactly as they're designed to fire. Just later. Just in the evening and night, instead of the morning. When everyone else's signal is fading, yours is amplifying. When everyone else is preparing for sleep, you're preparing for focus. The night isn't stealing you away from proper sleep. The night is offering you your proper time. Your real hours. When you're meant to be awake and alert and engaged. And that feeling, that powerful, clear, focused, alive feeling, isn't something to suppress or fight or feel guilty about. It's something to understand, to recognize, to honor as what it is. Your circadian rhythm, working exactly as it should. Your wolf nature, expressing itself fully. The night claiming you, as it always has, as it always will. The cost of living late. We've talked about the power of the night. The clarity, the focus, the feeling of finally being yourself. And all of that is real. All of that matters. But we also need to talk about the cost. Because living as a wolf in a world built for morning birds doesn't just mean struggling with early mornings and shining in the evening. It also means navigating certain challenges that come with the territory. These aren't moral failings. They're not signs that you're doing something wrong. They're just consequences. Side effects of a circadian rhythm that doesn't align with societal norms. Things that many wolves experience and deal with, often without realizing that these challenges are connected to their chronotype. Let's talk about one of the most common ones, late-night eating. You're up at 10 p.m., 11, midnight, maybe later. You're awake, you're alert, your brain is active. And at some point, you notice you're hungry. Not starving, necessarily. Not emergency hungry. Just hungry. That familiar sensation in your stomach. That mild restlessness. That awareness that food would be nice right now. So you go to the kitchen. And you eat something. Maybe it's a snack. Chips, crackers, cookies. Whatever's easy to grab. Maybe it's more substantial. Leftover pizza. A sandwich, cereal, something quick that you can eat while doing whatever else you're doing. And then, an hour or two later, you're hungry again. So you eat something else. This pattern, late-night snacking, sometimes turning into late-night binges, is incredibly common among wolves. And it's not about lack of willpower. It's not about bad habits, though it can certainly become habitual. It's a consequence of being awake and active for hours after dinner. Think about it. If you eat dinner at 6 or 7 p.m., like many people do, and then you're awake and active until 1 or 2 in the morning, that's 6, 7, 8 hours after your last real meal. Of course you're hungry. Your body is awake. Your brain is active. You're burning energy. And after 7 hours, your stomach is saying, hey, we could use some fuel here. For a morning person who eats dinner at 6 and goes to bed at 10, there's only a 4-hour gap. Much more manageable. They might have a small evening snack, But there's not this long stretch of wakeful hours creating multiple hunger signals. But you have this extended evening and nighttime period where you're fully awake and active, and your body quite reasonably expects to be fed during active hours. The problem is that late-night eating, especially late-night snacking on convenient foods that tend to be high in sugar and simple carbs, can create issues. Weight gain is one. When you're eating substantial calories late at night, especially if those calories are in addition to 3 regular meals, the math works against you. Your body doesn't need that fuel for activity, since you'll be sleeping eventually. It stores it. But there's also the quality of sleep to consider. Eating close to bedtime, especially larger amounts or harder to digest foods, can interfere with sleep quality. Your digestive system is active when your body is trying to shift into sleep mode. It can cause discomfort, disrupted sleep, less restorative rest. And then there's the emotional component. Many wolves feel guilty about late-night eating. They feel like they're being bad, like they lack self-control, like they're sabotaging their own health. They make rules: no eating after 9 p.m., nothing after dinner, and then break them and feel worse. But here's the thing. If you're genuinely hungry because you're awake and active 7 hours after dinner, that's not a lack of self-control. That's your body responding normally to an extended period of wakefulness. The solution isn't to fight the hunger or feel guilty about it. The solution is to work with your reality. If you're going to be awake until 1 or 2 in the morning, you need to structure your eating differently than someone who goes to bed at 10. One strategy that works for many wolves: eat a later, more filling dinner. Instead of eating at 6 p.m., eat at 8. Maybe even 8:30 or 9. Later than conventional dinner time, but earlier in your personal evening. And make it substantial. Make it filling. Protein, fiber, complex carbs, healthy fats. A meal that will actually sustain you for the next several hours, rather than a light dinner that leaves you hungry by 10. This does a few things. First, it reduces the time gap between your last meal and sleep. Instead of 7 or 8 hours, it's now 4 or 5. Much more manageable. Second, it aligns your eating with your actual rhythm. You're eating during the hours when you're alert and your digestion is active, rather than trying to eat a big meal when your body isn't really ready for it yet. Third, it reduces the likelihood of snacking. When you've had a satisfying meal at 8 or 9, you're much less likely to be prowling around the kitchen at midnight looking for something to eat. Acceptance plus adjustment, not fixing. So here we are. We've walked through what you are, how you work, when you shine, what you're up against, and what it costs to be a wolf in a world built for morning birds. And now we need to talk about what comes next. Because this isn't just about understanding. This is about living. About finding a way forward that honors who you are while still functioning in the reality you're in. And that starts with a fundamental mindset shift. A shift away from fixing. Away from trying to become something you're not. Away from the endless cycle of attempting to transform yourself into a morning person, failing, feeling guilty, and trying again. And a shift towards something else. Something more sustainable. Something more compassionate. Acceptance plus adjustment. Let me be very clear about what acceptance means in this context. Acceptance means acknowledging that you are a wolf, that this is biological, that it's partly genetic, that your circadian rhythm is delayed, and no amount of willpower or discipline or trying harder is going to fundamentally change that. Acceptance means letting go of the idea that you're broken and need to be fixed. Letting go of the guilt about not being a morning person. Letting go of the comparison to people whose rhythms naturally align with societal expectations. Acceptance means recognizing that you can't turn into a true morning type. You just can't. That's not how chronotypes work. A wolf will never wake up at 6 a.m. feeling refreshed and energized and ready to conquer the day the way a lion does. A wolf will never find early mornings easy and natural and pleasant. A wolf will never peak at 9 in the morning. You can adapt. You can cope. You can function in the morning with enough effort and support. But you cannot become a person whose natural rhythm is early. That's not in your genetic code. That's not how your circadian clock is built. And trying to become that person, trying to fix your chronotype, is like trying to change your height or your eye color. You're fighting against your fundamental biology, and you will lose that fight. Every time. So acceptance means stopping the fight. Surrendering to what is. Acknowledging your wolf nature, not as a problem to solve, but as a reality to work with. But, and this is crucial, acceptance does not mean resignation. It doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean, well, I'm a wolf, so I guess I'll just stay up until 3 a.m. every night and sleep until noon and the world can deal with it. Because for most people, that's not realistic. You have jobs, commitments, relationships, responsibilities. You live in a world that operates on a morning schedule, and you need to interface with that world. So acceptance is only the first part. The second part is adjustment. Not changing who you are, not fixing your chronotype, but making strategic adjustments that help you function better within the constraints you're dealing with. Think of it this way. If you're left-handed living in a right-handed world, acceptance means acknowledging that you're left-handed, and that's not going to change. Adjustment means learning how to use right-handed scissors if you need to, or seeking out left-handed tools where possible, or finding workarounds that make right-handed systems more manageable. You don't become right-handed, but you adjust. You adapt. You find ways to function in a world that wasn't designed for you. That's what we're talking about here. As a wolf, you can't turn into a true morning type, but you can make adjustments to your habits, your environment, your schedule, that help you fall asleep closer to midnight instead of 2 or 3 in the morning, that help you feel noticeably more functional in the earlier parts of the day, even if you'll never be at your peak then. These adjustments won't transform you. They won't make mornings easy or pleasant. They won't shift your peak hours from evening to morning. But they can make your life more manageable. They can reduce the severity of the mismatch between your biology and societal demands. They can help you function in an early-oriented world without completely sacrificing your health and well-being. So what kinds of adjustments are we talking about? One of the most powerful tools for wolves is morning bright light exposure. Light is the primary signal that entrains your circadian rhythm, that synchronizes your internal clock to the external world. And bright light in the morning has the effect of shifting your rhythm earlier. Not dramatically, not enough to turn you into a morning person, but enough to matter. If you can get bright light exposure, and we're talking bright, ideally natural sunlight, or a light therapy box that mimics sunlight, within the first hour or two of waking, you're sending a signal to your circadian system. You're saying, this is morning, This is when the day starts. Let's calibrate accordingly. Over time, with consistent morning light exposure, your rhythm can shift somewhat earlier. Your melatonin onset might move from 2 a.m. to midnight. Your natural wake time might move from 9:30 to 8. Your evening peak might shift from 10 p.m. to 8 p.m. These might seem like small changes, but for a wolf trying to function in a 9-to-5 world, 2 hours can make an enormous difference. Falling asleep at midnight instead of 2 means you can get 7 hours of sleep before a 7 a.m. wake-up instead of 5. Feeling slightly more alert at 8 a.m. instead of being completely non-functional can mean the difference between barely surviving morning meetings and actually participating in them. Small shifts, not transformation, but meaningful improvement. The key is consistency. Morning light exposure works through repetition, through training your circadian system day after day. One morning of bright light won't do much, but weeks or months of it, that can create noticeable change. Another adjustment, consistent wake times. This one is hard. It might be the hardest recommendation for wolves to hear, because your body wants to sleep late. Your natural wake time is late. And on weekends, on days off, on any day you're not forced awake by an alarm, you want to sleep in. You want to let your body wake up when it's ready. And you should. Sometimes, you need that recovery. You need those days when you can follow your natural rhythm and catch up on the sleep debt you've accumulated during the week. But if you sleep until noon on weekends and then try to wake up at 7 on Monday, you're creating massive schedule shifts. You're essentially giving yourself jet lag every single week. Social jet lag, it's called. The difference between your social schedule, work week, and your biological schedule, weekend. And that jet lag makes Monday mornings even more brutal than they need to be. Your circadian system was just adjusting to the weekend schedule, later sleep, later wake, and now you're yanking it back to the early schedule. Your body has no idea what time zone it's in. So the adjustment, the recommendation, is to keep your wake time relatively consistent even on weekends. Not exactly the same, you're not a robot, but within an hour or 2 of your weekday wake time. If you wake at 7 during the week, try not to sleep past 9 on weekends. If you wake at 6:30 for work, aim for no later than 8:30 on Saturday and Sunday. I know this sounds terrible. It sounds like you're being asked to give up the one thing that makes the work week tolerable, the promise of sleeping in on the weekend. But here's the thing. Consistent wake times actually make weekday mornings less miserable. When your circadian system isn't constantly being jerked back and forth between schedules, when it knows roughly when to expect morning to happen, it can prepare better. Your cortisol can start rising at more appropriate times. Your body temperature can adjust. Your sleep can become more efficient. You might still need an alarm. You might still not love mornings. But the brutal, crushing difficulty of early waking can become slightly less brutal, slightly more manageable. And that's what we're going for. Not easy, not pleasant, just more functional, more sustainable. These adjustments, morning light, consistent wake times, they can help wolves function in an early-oriented world. They can nudge your rhythm earlier by an hour or 2. They can reduce the severity of morning fog and make early sleep more achievable. But they will not fully turn you into a morning type. You need to hear this. You need to understand this. Because if you go into this thinking, okay, I'll do the light therapy and the consistent wake times, and then I'll finally be a morning person, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and frustration. These tools can help you adapt. They cannot change your fundamental nature. You will still be a wolf. Your peak hours will still be later in the day. You will still feel more alert and creative and alive in the evening than in the morning. You will still struggle with early mornings more than morning people do. But you might struggle a bit less. You might function a bit better. You might find a middle ground between your natural rhythm and society's demands that feels more sustainable than what you're doing now. That's the goal. Not transformation. Not becoming someone else. Just adjustment. Optimization within constraints. Acceptance of who you are, combined with strategic adjustments that make your reality more livable. And here's what that looks like in practice. It looks like acknowledging that you're a wolf, understanding that this is biological and genetic and not your fault. And then, from that place of acceptance, making choices. Choosing to get morning light exposure because it helps, not because it will fix you. Choosing to keep a more consistent wake time because it reduces social jet lag, not because it will make you love mornings. Choosing to eat dinner later because that works with your rhythm, not because you're giving in to bad habits. Practical rhythm-friendly structure. We've covered a lot of ground together. The biology, the struggles, the costs, the mindset shifts. And now we arrive at the most practical part. The part where we talk about what you can actually do. How you can structure your days and nights in a way that works with your wolf nature instead of against it. This isn't about perfection. This isn't a rigid prescription that you have to follow exactly or you've failed. This is a framework, a starting point, a rhythm-friendly structure that many wolves find helpful. Take what works for you, adapt what doesn't. But most importantly, understand that the goal here isn't to force yourself into a morning person's schedule. It's to find a wolf-friendly routine that still allows you to function in the world as it exists. So let's walk through what an ideal wolf routine might look like. Day by day, hour by hour. Let's start with waking up. The target wake time for a wolf trying to function in a standard world is around 7:30 in the morning. Maybe 8. Somewhere in that window. Not 6. Not 6:30. Those times are for lions, for the true early birds. Asking a wolf to wake at 6 and function, well, is asking too much. It's setting yourself up for failure and misery. But 7:30? 7:30 is achievable. It's still earlier than your body probably wants to wake naturally, but it's not so early that you're completely non-functional. And it gives you enough time to get ready and arrive at work or school or whatever morning commitment you have by 9 or 9:30. So your alarm goes off at 7:30 or 8. And here's the first critical step. You get up. Not in 5 minutes. Not after 3 rounds of snooze. Now, you get up when the alarm sounds. I know that's hard. I know your body is screaming at you to stay in bed. But every time you hit snooze, you're fragmenting your sleep into useless pieces. You're not getting quality rest in those 9-minute intervals. You're just making the wake-up process longer and more painful. So the alarm goes off, and you get up. Immediately. Before you can think about it too much. And the very first thing you do, within 30 to 60 minutes of waking, ideally within the first 15 or 20 minutes, is get bright light exposure. This is crucial. This is one of the most powerful tools you have for helping your circadian system adapt to an earlier schedule. If it's sunny outside, go outside, even just for 10 or 15 minutes. Stand in your yard, sit on your porch, walk around the block. Let natural sunlight hit your eyes. Don't wear sunglasses for this. You need the light to reach your retinas to signal your circadian clock. If it's dark out or cloudy, or you can't get outside, use a light therapy box. 10,000 lux is the standard therapeutic brightness. Sit near it while you eat breakfast or check your email or just drink your coffee. 20 to 30 minutes of exposure. This light exposure is doing something important. It's telling your suprachiasmatic nucleus, that master clock in your brain, that morning has arrived, that this is when the day begins. And over time, with consistent morning light, your entire circadian system will shift slightly earlier. Not dramatically, but enough to help. Now it's morning. You're awake. You've gotten your light exposure. What do you do with these early hours? Light tasks. Simple tasks. Things that don't require your best thinking. This is the time for emails that just need responses, not deep thought. For administrative work. For organizing. For routine tasks you can do on autopilot. Shower. Breakfast. Getting ready. Commuting. These are all appropriate morning activities because they're relatively simple and structured. But don't schedule important meetings at 8:30 a.m. Don't try to tackle your most complex work project first thing. Don't make major decisions or have difficult conversations if you can avoid it. You're functional in the morning, but you're not at your best. Save your best hours for your best work. Now let's talk about coffee, because I know many of you are thinking about it. Coffee is wonderful. Caffeine is a legitimate tool for managing a chronotype mismatch. But timing matters. When you first wake up, your cortisol is naturally rising. Even for a wolf, though not as dramatically as for a morning person. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, essentially preventing the sleepy signal from getting through. But if you drink coffee right when you wake up, when your cortisol is already handling the wake-up process, you're not getting maximum benefit from the caffeine. Plus, caffeine taken too early can interfere with your natural cortisol rhythm, potentially making you more dependent on caffeine over time. So the recommendation is to delay your first coffee until late morning. Around 11 a.m., maybe 10:30 if you're really struggling. By then, your natural cortisol surge has leveled off. You're in that mid-morning window where you need a boost. Caffeine at this time can help carry you through to afternoon, when your natural alertness starts to rise on its own. And then, and this is important, stop caffeine by around 2 p.m. 2 in the afternoon. No coffee, no tea, no caffeinated soda after that. Why? Because caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours. If you drink coffee at 2 p.m., half of that caffeine is still in your system at 8 p.m. A quarter of it is still there at 2 a.m. And for a wolf trying to fall asleep around midnight, having caffeine in your system is working against you. Your melatonin onset is already delayed. You don't need caffeine blocking adenosine and making it even harder to feel sleepy at a reasonable hour. So, first coffee around 11 a.m. Last caffeine by 2 p.m. That's the window. Now we're moving into afternoon. And this is where your day gets better. Afternoon is when you start to come alive. When the fog lifts. when your brain starts operating at something closer to full capacity. This is when you schedule your demanding work. Your important meetings, have them at 2-3, for in the afternoon if you can. Your complex projects, your creative work, your deep thinking, save it for afternoon. From roughly noon to 8 or 9 p.m., you're in your peak window. Use it. Protect it. Structure your day so that your most important, most challenging work happens during these hours. If you have any control over your schedule, advocate for this. Ask if that morning meeting can be moved to afternoon. Suggest that the brainstorming session happen at 4 instead of 9. Block off your late afternoon and early evening hours for focused work. This is when you shine. This is when you should be evaluated. This is when you're capable of your best work. And here's something important. After 9 p.m., deliberately switch to relaxing activities. Even though you still feel alert. Even though your brain is still active. Even though you could keep working. You need to start signaling to your brain that night is coming. That sleep is approaching. That it's time to wind down. This doesn't mean you have to go to bed at 9. But it does mean you transition from stimulating, demanding activities to relaxing ones. No work emails after 9. No intense problem solving. No scrolling through stressful news or engaging in heated online discussions. Instead, reading for pleasure, light TV or movies, conversation with family or friends, a hobby that's relaxing rather than demanding, music, a bath, gentle stretching, activities that signal we're winding down now to your nervous system. Around 10 or 11 p.m., start your pre-bed routine. And this is where light management becomes crucial again. Dim the lights in your home. Not pitch black, you need to see, but dimmer than your bright daytime lighting. Use lamps instead of overhead lights. Lower the brightness on screens if you're still using them. And ideally, shut off stimulating screens about an hour before bed. So if you're aiming for midnight sleep, screens off by 11. This is hard. I know it's hard. Your brain is still active. Your phone is right there. There's one more episode, one more article, one more scroll through social media. But blue light from screens suppresses melatonin. And you need melatonin. Your onset is already delayed. You don't need screens pushing it even later. So find something to do in that last hour before bed that doesn't involve screens. Reading a physical book. Listening to music or podcasts. Journaling. Talking with a partner. Preparing for the next day. Something calm. Something that doesn't require a screen. And then, around midnight, you go to bed. Midnight. That's the target bedtime. Not 2 a.m. Not 1 a.m. Midnight. Is this earlier than you'd naturally fall asleep if left to your own devices? Probably. But it's not so early that it's impossible. With the right preparation, the evening wind down, the dimmed lights, the screen-free hour, midnight becomes achievable. And midnight to 7:30 is 7.5 hours. That's solid sleep. That's enough for most people to function well. Some nights you'll fall asleep by 12:15 or 12:30. Some nights it might take until 1. But you're aiming for lights out around midnight, and actual sleep within 30 to 45 minutes of that. Now, here's something crucial about weekends and days off. You maintain roughly the same schedule. I know you want to sleep in. You've earned it. You've been dragging yourself out of bed at 7:30 all week. But if you sleep until 11 on Saturday and Sunday, You're undoing all the circadian training you've done during the week. You're pushing your rhythm later again. And Monday morning will be absolutely brutal. So the recommendation is to avoid sleeping past about 8:15 a.m., even on weekends. 7:30 to 8:15. Give yourself that window. It's 45 minutes of extra sleep on weekend mornings. It's something. It's a bit of relief. But it's not so much that you're completely resetting your clock. And yes, this might mean you're a bit sleep deprived on weekends if you're staying up later socially. That's okay. You can catch up with an early afternoon nap if needed. Remember, early and short. 1 or 2 p.m., 20 to 30 minutes maximum. The consistent wake time is more important than occasionally getting a bit less sleep. Let's talk about exercise, because we haven't touched on that yet. Exercise is great for sleep. It builds sleep pressure. It helps regulate circadian rhythms. It's good for your overall health. But timing matters. Favor light to moderate exercise earlier in the day or early evening. A morning walk, even just 15 minutes. A lunchtime gym session. An afternoon run. Exercise at 5 or 6 p.m. These are all fine. They help without interfering with sleep. But avoid intense workouts in the last 3 hours before bed. So if you're going to bed at midnight, nothing intense after 9 p.m. Why? Because intense exercise raises your core body temperature and increases alertness. It can take several hours for your body to cool down and calm down enough for sleep. If you're doing high-intensity interval training at 10 p.m. and trying to sleep at midnight, you're fighting against your own physiology. So if evening is your only exercise time, keep it moderate. A walk, gentle yoga, easy biking. Nothing that gets your heart rate way up and leaves you pumped full of endorphins right before bed. Let me put this all together into a sample day. Not a rigid schedule, but a framework you can adapt. 7:30 a.m. Wake up. Get up immediately, no snoozing. 7:30 to 8 a.m. Get bright light exposure. Outside if possible, light therapy box if not. 8 to 11 a.m. Light tasks. Routine work. Breakfast. Commute. Administrative stuff. Things that don't require deep thinking. 11 a.m. First coffee of the day. Noon to 2 p.m. More demanding work starts to become appropriate. Your brain is waking up. 2 p.m. Last caffeine of the day. 2 to 8 p.m. Peak hours. Schedule your most important work here. Deep focus. Complex problems. Creative projects. Important meetings. 8 to 9 p.m. Transition period. Finishing up work, starting to wind down. 9 p.m. Deliberately switch to relaxing activities. No more work. No more stimulating tasks. 10 p.m. Start dimming lights. Begin pre-bed routine. 11 p.m. Screens off. Final hour before bed with no phones, tablets, computers, TV. Midnight, lights out. Aim for sleep. This pattern, repeated consistently, creates a rhythm. It works with your wolf biology while still allowing you to function in the morning world. You're not trying to become a morning person. You're being a wolf who's found a sustainable way to interface with morning person society. And that's the hope here. That's the usable guidance. You can do this. You can structure your days in a way that honors your chronotype while still meeting your obligations. You can get enough sleep. You can be functional in the morning, even if you'll never love it. You can save your peak hours for your peak work. It requires consistency. It requires discipline around bedtime and wake time. It requires protecting your evening wind down and managing light exposure and being smart about caffeine. But it's doable. It's sustainable. And it's so much better than the alternative of constantly fighting yourself, constantly sleep deprived, constantly feeling like you're failing. This is a wolf-friendly structure, a rhythm that works with your biology, not against it. You're still a wolf. You'll always be a wolf. The night will always call to you. The evening will always be when you feel most alive. But you can be a wolf who also functions in the daylight world, who gets enough sleep, who shows up for morning commitments without being completely destroyed by them, who saves their best work for their best hours and makes peace with doing adequate work during their worst hours. That's the goal. That's what's possible. Not transformation, but sustainable adaptation. A life that works. A rhythm you can maintain. You being you. A wolf being a wolf. Living in the world as it is, while honoring the biology you have. That's not just surviving. That's a form of thriving. And you can do it. You really can. One consistent wake time at a time. One morning light exposure at a time. One midnight bedtime at a time. Building a rhythm. Creating a structure. Finding your way. As a wolf. Always as a wolf. But a wolf who's figured out how to make it work. Final gentle pause. And that's where we'll rest tonight. In the knowledge that you understand yourself better now. That you know what you are, why you are, and how to work with it rather than against it. Sleep well, whenever sleep finds you. And wake knowing that you're not broken, you're not wrong, you're just a wolf. And that's exactly right.